Paul has a very impressive background. He is a career coach, expert job search strategist and tactician, a career counselor, a workshop presenter, a keynote speaker, an expert in resume writing, networking, interviewing, author, navigating your success. His topic today will be the changing employment model, managing your career in the post-COVID economy. Paul,
Well,
take it away.
Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate that. And you know, I'm always, I never know what to make of introductions. I appreciate them greatly, but you know, it's not about me. It's really about you. And so before we start, I just wanted to ask all of you real quick, who's got how much snow? If you want to pop in the chat, how much snow do you have in your yard? Because here's how much snow I have, and I'm in north central New Jersey, and that pile is about 30 feet wide, about 50 feet long, and about 18 or 16 feet tall in my backyard. And so we've got a snowmaker, and my son just loves snow, so I had to share that. But let me get out of that, come over here for a second, change my background, and now let's share my presentation and share. Now, I'm going to leave it in this mode rather than in presentation mode, because if there's things we want to add to the conversation, I want to have space to do that and ability to do that. And here's the thing, this is going to be a very, very, very interactive presentation. So I very much want all of you to participate and share your thoughts, comments, and ideas as much as possible. Now, let me just see if I can make that screen a little bigger so it's easier for you to read. And there we go. Okay, so let's dig right in. One other thing I should note about my background is that over the course of my career, I have been unemployed a total of 3 times, each time with 9 to 18 months span between jobs. And so I've been long-term unemployed multiple times, and I can appreciate what many people are experiencing. We're going to have a conversation today, and so I absolutely expect and want you to tell me what you see and hear. We're going to cover these topics, but really it's more about what is actually happening in the work environment today than it is about me sharing, you know, information or knowledge. So I want to hear from you as we go through. And I've got the chat up, but just in case, if Jerry or Joyce, you can just kind of monitor a little bit as well. And if I miss something, you can grab it in there. But please, everyone, unmute when it's appropriate and feel free to chime in at any point in time. So we're going to go through a bunch of questions, 3 or 4 of them, and that's where I want to hear your thoughts. So what trends are you observing in business and work today? What are you and by the way, how many people are unemployed? How many of you are unemployed? Is it most of you? Few? Okay, good. So what are the unemployed saying about what it looks like to be in the working world today? What does work look like today? Bueller.
I can say something maybe. So what it means to be employed?
What,
are you saying?
What,
or unemployed?
no, what are you seeing happening in terms of trends related to work? When you're out there interviewing, when you're talking to employers, what are they saying it's like to be in the workforce or to get into the workforce today?
It's everybody perceives it, and I think I was there too, that it's tougher today. It's different than what it used to be. But I think what I'm learning is that not necessarily it's tougher, it's just different. There's a different approach, and everything is online these days. Networking is the key though. Everybody's using that online stuff, but there's a lot of I noticed the senior level layoffs and junior position hirings, and the salaries are definitely a lot lower than, or they seem to be lower than what we're used to getting in. The time period of getting a job seems to be stretching longer, and there's a lot more applicants.
And so you've stated a couple of really important things there, Shirley. Number one, that work today is different than it was pre-pandemic. And today is going to be different than what it's going to look like probably in 3 or 6 months from now, based on what I'm seeing and hearing. That it's in continually evolving as we learn how to manage not only the COVID itself, the pandemic itself, but also manage the way work is done within that pandemic. So you're absolutely right. Now I'm forgetting a couple of the other comments or points that you made. I apologize, that really struck with me. The Great Resignation you had mentioned, more and more I'm hearing people call it the Great Shuffle rather than the Great Resignation. And the concept there really is just that, yeah, people are leaving jobs, oftentimes without someplace else to go. And we can talk in a minute about why they're leaving. But in many cases, they are leaving to go somewhere else where they think the grass is greener. The question is the grass really greener in that new job, right? What else do we see? The Great Reflection, Otto. I'm sorry, who was going to talk?
That was me.
Go ahead, Jerry.
I was just going to say that from what I hear in the grapevine, if you will, there's offices. I can't imagine what's going to happen to real estate, because there are a great many offices that are being unused. People are working from home, and the office is simply a convenient place to stop for something perhaps that's important, but otherwise it's home based. So I don't know what's happening with maybe someone with real estate can contribute to the discussion, but basically I don't know what's happening with rentals and so on and so forth. It's got to be a disaster.
You're right. Anybody have any insights into what's happening with commercial real estate?
I would only make a couple comments that commercial mortgage REITs really haven't been crushed in the stock market. I also have a friend who works in institutional investing for commercial real estate, and there really hasn't been a panic yet. And I think the third thing is everybody should just go out and look for surveys of what employers are trying to do. I think the couple surveys I've seen is they're trying to create hybrid workspace, but they can't walk away from their leases. Now, for what Jerry's saying, maybe 5 years from now, the whole landscape has transitioned. But don't forget, leases are non-cancelable unless you're going bankrupt. So
it's a good point. Good point. And I'm going to come back to you in a second, Otto. I just remembered a couple of the other things, Shirley, that you said. Lower salaries. Anybody else experiencing that the offers that they're getting or the jobs they're applying for is for lower salaries, or if you're working, your company is offering lower salaries?
I'll add one thing. It's not really lower salaries that I was seeing when I was actively interviewing, but it's like they're throwing everything in the kitchen sink. And the reason why I left my one long time role right before COVID hit is I think, among our generation of people on this call, we tend to be really responsible and do all the work, and you just get squeezed. And so then when I was interviewing for roles, my life was going to go from being crazy before to then crazy new, but less pay. So that's personally how I ended up in the consulting, because when you're outside, it's easier to control some of that. But that's why I stopped looking for active jobs, because I don't really feel like it's a good balance between pay and responsibilities for people at our level at the time being. But we'll see if that changes, because I have no problem going back into an office, but I don't want to be there 24/7. And there's different expectations for different generations. Some people
Yeah.
don't even have to announce when they're going to work or not in this new free flow environment, but the work has to get done. So it's like, what are they asking and relative to the pay? So
That's
I would
interesting.
agree with that. Although I do have to say, I've interviewed in New York City, in Houston, in San Antonio, and in Denver. And I definitely noticed a big salary discrepancy for the duties, for the job description. So New York, Northeast area still pays, I would say the same, but I would agree that definitely they throw in everything. I also agree that the pandemic brought us into longer hours and it got really crazy. And I don't think there's a whole lot of flexibility as to work-life balance. I think it's gotten tougher and the employers are expecting a lot more out of us going forward. I actually honestly feel we're in a bubble. I don't think this is sustainable.
This is actually a very fascinating conversation for me, because what I'm experiencing here in the Northeast, in particular the greater New York metro area, is very different from what you are describing. Yet there are commonalities. When you say lower salaries, Shirley, I think the way that I would put it is that employers are paying based on your cost of living or your zip code, rather than based on a corporate standard. And that's not necessarily good. I don't know if it's bad, but it certainly is a different way of approaching compensation. And so it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Of the list that I've got here on the page, what are some of the things that kind of stand out to you as things that you are seeing or you're not understanding? Or oh, Otto, I'm sorry, you the great reflection. I was going to go back to you. Go ahead.
No, I mean, hopefully you can hear me. My microphone is acting a
Yep.
little bit strange, but I think Anne kind of mentioned this. She said, I'm looking to do things differently than I did in 2019, and I think this is the case for all employees, the entire base, whether you got kids or not, and just saying, okay, I want to stay healthy through pandemic, but I may want to do things differently and take ownership of my career. The younger generation's looking at saying, okay, give me multiple streams of income just in case, this type of thing. So there's a lot of this dynamic going on, which, we haven't seen in, at least my career, at least in the last 40 years. So dynamic times, dynamic things that you've got listed here as well, these top 10.
Anything else stand out to anyone?
Paul, could you illuminate the consumer behavior changes as an impact?
Sure. Because we're living at home and working at home, we're not using restaurants as much as a general rule across the country. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing in many cases, because they don't have the staff to serve us anyway. But I think we're going to see a significant change in the number of restaurants that we have available to us, the hours that those restaurants that survive are available to us, and the types of foods that are going to be offered is going to be changing based on our different needs. I wouldn't be surprised, and this is just true conjecture on my part. I have absolutely nothing to back this up, right? But I wouldn't be at all surprised to see if fast food decreases some, whereas more casual dining increases dramatically. Because when we do go out, we're not going to want to grab and go, or we're not running between meetings that we're driving to and from. When we go out, it's because we're going to want to go out and have a dining experience, not just pick up food. Now, the other exception to that, of course, is we may not want to eat in a restaurant at all, and therefore the continued grab and go in terms of the delivery service, that kind of stuff. Sorry, my brain is not working yet this morning. Maybe I need more coffee. So I think that's one example of a consumer behavior change. I think we are seeing, because of the fears of shortages, we're seeing more and more people stockpile and store more and more goods. And hence we're seeing changes of what's available from that perspective in the stores when we do go shopping. But then if you look at the one right above it, the supply chain issues, that's another reason why stores tend not to be stocked. The thing I see with supply chain risk is more and more employers are starting to look at their supply chain and say, how can we bring it back on shore? I don't want to be dependent on this, cross-country, cross-world transportation that has been so problematic throughout this pandemic. So if I can bring my raw materials back on shore, then I've got tighter control and a better control over my supply chain. So I'm seeing that as a trend I hear a bit about.
But that would portend higher prices because of the difference in wages domestically as opposed to, stuff coming from China, what have you.
And so therefore inflation and the divide between the haves and the have-nots that's continuing to grow. And so all of these things are interrelated in many, many different ways, right? Yes, and you're right, Otto. Just-in-time inventory is no longer viable. And so we need to find ways to do more stockpiling, and that's going to be a change in corporate financing as well, right? To have that much money tied up in stock. I mean physical stock, right? Anything else on this list, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, hello, John
Go
Miller
ahead.
here. I might add that finding hourly skilled and unskilled labor is very difficult. The skilled labor that we employ is experiencing a 20% plus raise over the last 2 years. That also fishtails into your fast food thing. The fast food service and employment looks miserable in every establishment you go into.
Yep.
It's just not people, going for those jobs. In the financial position sector, I find the people jumping for a job because they can get more money. I don't find that they're getting less money. They're getting more money, so they're using the opportunity to jump with skills that are limited for the positions that at least I'm looking to fill. So that's my observation from here at O'Hare Field. Cool.
Thanks, John. And I hope your travels are safe, or do you work there?
I work here, so I'm particularly interested if you can one day help me find aircraft mechanics.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? I actually started my career 15 years in corporate aviation. I worked with KC Aviation, Jet Aviation, and Flight Safety International, just to name a couple of big names you might be familiar with.
We should touch base after the call. Thank you.
Please connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll do that.
You bet. Thank you.
So what we're seeing here in the Northeast, there's a big push to go to the $15 minimum wage. And even though the federal minimum wage is much lower, and I'm sure around states in your area, it's lower as well. Here in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, you're not going to get an employee if you're not paying $15 an hour at this point. I think New Jersey is slated to be at 15 an hour by 2024. And I think Connecticut or Massachusetts, it's already there. Do you know, Joyce, is Connecticut already there?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah. So that is causing, rising prices for us in this area. Because you're right, the hourly unskilled laborer is demanding a living wage. And for us, $15 an hour. In fact, my local workforce development board, whom I work very closely with, said that in my county, Morris County, New Jersey, it takes $28 an hour to have a living wage for an individual and $43 an hour for a living wage in order to be a family of 4. So it's crazy, absolutely crazy. So let's look at another question. The people you know who are working, what's their perspective on what's going on today? And any of you on the call who are working, love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think employees really want flexibility. Yeah, I'm in manufacturing in Muskegon, Michigan, and we've got plants around the world, but southern plants as well. And I think people want flexibility. I think sometimes we, as employers, think that it's always money, but they're saying, "Hey, I want this. I want flexibility. I want a little bit of remote work. I want to check in when I can't, when it's available to me." And it's a really different mindset from my historical thought process, and work is a place you go to. It's not necessarily an activity you do. And that's the historic mindset. So that's just my initial.
No, I agree with you. Work-life balance for employees is becoming a real hot topic. And I saw in a couple of different articles now where the 4-day work week, a 10 to 12-hour 4-day work week is becoming more of interest and value to employees. And so that's something we may see happening. There are a couple of big companies that are already experimenting with that, and they're finding, at least initially, just in the last 3-6 months, that they're getting greater productivity out of their people in the fewer days but longer hours. So I thought that was an interesting concept. Anybody seeing anything else, or is there anything on this list that stands out?
Yeah, from our standpoint, we're an HR company, so it's interesting, for the clients that we serve, who are mostly smaller company, smaller, under 50 employees, finding and keeping people remains a challenge, as a lot of people have said here. But just creating, balancing the idea of remote work for some of these folks, as well as creating it. But people want to be able to have that flexibility, but at the same time, they want culture. So it's kind of it seems like a dichotomy in terms, but they want to be connected to the company, but they still want the ability to work remotely. So that's a big challenge for a lot of employers that we're finding. It's just,
Boy, I love that comment, Marty. How do you create culture in a remote work environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then there's a lot of different ways to connect, and creativity on the benefit side is one end of it that we're seeing, but just doing things to kind of get, it's a challenge, and then they're finding, trying to be creative about it, but it's an ongoing thing, and we're not there yet.
As I repeated that, I heard my husband in the background in another room laughing because he works for United Parcel Service in their IT area. And we often joked that he bleeds brown because of the culture that UPS has created, that he absolutely is a company man through and through and through. And he's really having difficulty through this pandemic because a lot of what he depended on for that culture has gone away. And so he's not really feeling as connected to his coworkers as he had in the past. So you're right on target there, Marty. And you're right. I think for management, which I want to talk more about in a moment, but I think for management, the question is going to be, how do we create opportunities for culture? How do we create those sidebar conversations that take place around the water cooler that also then create the connections, as well as the innovative thought process that finds solutions to ongoing issues and questions. Marty, since you're in HR, I want to ask, have you heard about mandatory mental health days as a type of benefit coming at this point?
Not as a mandatory yet. I mean, people are certainly talking about it. They've and some of the clients that we have, as well as our own company, they've added or altered, paid time off to accommodate any number of things. Not necessarily sick days, but really personal days, and using that as certainly as a definition. Absolutely, it's certainly something that everyone's talking about and wants to, there's a desire to accommodate it, and it's how it's shaped and from where it gets shaped, I think is still to be determined. I think it's probably better a ground up approach as opposed to a top down,
Yes.
like a federal state of some sort. as usually is the case in most things, but in this area. So, but I think it is certainly there, and it's a real issue, and it's something employers are really, concerned about and are trying to deal with. So the motivation is there to do something, and it's just a matter of what shape it takes. I think we're going to see all sorts of creative ways to deal with it.
One of the other things that I am seeing a lot of among my clients, both those who are employed and those who are unemployed, is they're seeking a sense of value and meaning to the work that they're doing. I want to know that A, I'm contributing to the bottom line and success of the company, and that I'm not just a cog, right? B, that even better would be my job has value to the greater good of society. And I see that at both extremes of the market. I have a group that called the YoJo Club, the Young Job Seekers Club, for people who are under 30. And those folks are saying to me, I don't want to just have a job for the sake of having a job. I want to have a job that's going to improve the quality of life, improve the quality of the environment, be sustainable. It's going to have intrinsic value to improving the human condition here on Earth. Right? I'm also seeing that the plus 50 crowd that are either unemployed or looking to make changes are saying one of the greatest dissatisfiers of my previous job was that I really felt like I did not have value, that I wasn't bringing meaning to the world or to my employer. Right? So I think as we get into leadership and management roles, we want to think about how can we help show to our employees the value that they bring to their job and to the company, and that's why they're important to us.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Paul. People really, give me a mission to drive. Give me some purpose beyond the paycheck. And I think you've got it on both sides, that where people more mature in their career saying, okay, right, I haven't seen that in the past, but now I've got so many working years left. Let me do this now. Let me invest or pay back or do those things, as well as kids, my kids, looking at it and say, give me a purpose beyond this, rather than just make money for the man, right?
Right. I think we've not talked a lot about it yet, but resilience and adaptability are key issues all throughout the market, no matter where you are in your career, no matter where you are in the employment space. We all need to learn to be resilient, and we all need to learn to be adaptable. Now, that really is nothing new. The truth is, and when we look at being a consulting employee, which I want to talk a little more about, and Ann, I'm going to want some thoughts from you on that. But what we're really talking about here is how do we manage change? And we need to manage it not just from the perspective of, as an employee, I need to manage the change in my company, both below, alongside, and above me in my hierarchy. But I also need to be able to manage my own change, and I need to manage how I react to change, right? And that's been the ages. I mean, I think I remember that even, when I was in my second or third professional position back in the late 80s. Like, crap, you want to do it this way now? But I'm already used to doing it that way. So this is nothing new, but I think it's taken on a new significance and a greater understanding, or maybe more bandwidth of our mental work to manage that. The improved listening and observation skills. And again, I want to talk more about that in a few minutes, because we're going to end our conversation today just really talking about how do we create a strategies for staying power within not only our field or our current role, but in our career. And I think the people who are the best listeners and the best observers are going to be the people who will have the greatest opportunity for long-term success. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But anything else on this list that strikes anyone?
What's number 8, Paul?
Oh, sorry, it's a little hidden there, isn't it? Work search versus job search. So, my work search buddy, my accountability buddy for my last 2 job searches, he and I talked about a lot of different things. In fact, he was a big catalyst for my book. It's a little thing, but it's called Work Search Buddies, finding a job with a little help from a friend. And one of the things that we noticed even 4 or 5 years ago was that with the then growth of the new idea of a gig economy, the now clear gig economy as the way of work, we need to stop looking at our careers in terms of job search. We can't go looking for a new job and then a new job and then a new job. We need to be looking for the work that is going to bring us the compensation and the work-life balance that we want in order to be successful. And so we want to expand our search concept from just looking for that next job to what are the different types of work that could happen. And Anne is living into that by being a consultant employee, where she is consulting with some places. She's got some longer or long jobs that are greater numbers of hours, while others that are not. I'm doing the same thing. I work for a grant from our local one-stop career center, and I put in about 20 hours a week on that grant. Now, the grant was 1.5 years. It's about to end. So I'm going to need to look for something else. But because I had that consistent 20 hours a week that I could build to that grant, it allowed me then to be able to build my career coaching business and do more coaching without the fears, the concerns, the anxieties of where's my next paycheck coming from. So I had those 2 different lines of income, and then add to it, I'm going to be publishing some more books, and hopefully that my books will become an income stream as well. I'm looking at where can I find work that is valuable, meaningful, sustainable, and provides me the compensation that I need for my family. Thoughts, questions on that?
That just plays into your adaptability there. Paul.
It absolutely does. Absolutely does. All right, so a couple of you are hiring managers. We've heard a couple thoughts from you already. Oh, wait, Jerry asked mental health days trade-off to compensation. So tell me more, Jerry, what are you really thinking or asking?
It just seems to me that what we've heard this morning is that employers are reluctant to pay more. So are they then offering things like mental health days as a buffer to the compensation package? I mean, I'm trying to explore whether or not that's what people are seeing.
John, would you want to try and touch on that, or do you? Because I can certainly speak some to it. Okay, so yes, employers more and more are saying, what do I need to offer in my compensation package that's in some cases, in many cases, individualized to you, so that you are a satisfied employee that's going to want to hang out with us for a while, right? And that may mean, and I suggest this all the time in terms of negotiating your offer to people, having the ability to work from home and also maybe get an extra week's vacation may reduce my living expenses by so much that I'm willing to take a lesser pay for the same job. I don't know if that's the best thing to do, don't get me wrong, right? But it's a question that I have to ask myself and then decide, how do I want to approach my salary negotiation, my compensation negotiation at the time of a job offer? So I may not be able to get additional vacation days, but maybe I can get additional PTO in order to cover mental health days. every employer and every individual is going to be different, and how we manage and negotiate that is going to be up to you. Okay. Yes, Mary, you're right. The tension between defined vacation and unlimited PTO, and what is the difference, and how do I as a manager handle that, as well as how do I as an employee handle that? And I'll give you one quick example of, maybe how it's mismanaged from my husband's work experience. He had a peer who, because UPS IT has an unlimited time off policy, or specifically unlimited sick time policy, he would take off every Friday and every Monday, literally for 63 weeks. And because of the policy, there was really nothing that the employer could do, so long as he was meeting all of his work expectations and requirements. And for the most part, he was meeting all of his expectations. He was getting his work done on time. The biggest issue that the company had with him was that when they had a question on a project he was dealing with on Friday or on Monday, they could not get an answer from him. And so they went 4 days, 2 business days, but 4 including the weekend, where they got no response from this guy on a project that he was working on. And that became problematic, and ultimately was the reason that they gave him for having to change up the way he manages his sick time. They also had to make some minor changes to their policy that said, if you're taking so many days off in a period of time, then we need to have some kind of a doctor's note that explains why you need to take off so many days in such a short period of time. Most companies have the policy, right? If you're out 3 consecutive days, we need a doctor's note. Well, he was only out 2 consecutive business days, but it was every week, 2 business days. So, they had to change that policy. So how do we manage that tension? And a big part of what we as a nation and employers are struggling with is this concept of, how do we as managers now manage all of these new scenarios and situations? How do we manage remote employees? How do we give them the opportunity to get those cultural connections that they need while continuing the flexibility of work from home, among other things? So any other thoughts, questions, ideas coming up from those of you who are hiring managers, or from the hiring managers you're talking to?
Yeah, I think it's about listening to the candidate, especially when you're putting an offer in front of them. At this level, what we're talking about, Feng group and above, I would expect somebody to come back with a counter saying, hey, give me a little bit more money, or I need that extra week of vacation, or here's what I want in addition. I would expect that because I want good negotiators on my teams. So I think that's important. And I think in terms of just other positions, compensation, it's about this person coming in and not filling a spot, but solving a business problem that I've got. And so that's what I want. That's what I need. And then what's the payback I can get or hiring that person? That's how my mindset it has been the last 2 years, more so than ever.
So I love to hear you say that, Otto, although I'm sad to hear you say that, right? Because it does get to number 2 directly. How do I keep my job? What do I need from you in order to keep my job, right? And that is a big question on a lot of managers' minds. I'm fearful for my future, so I need to hire people that are going to help me and protect me, right? You all as financial executives know better than anyone else the impact of headcount on the bottom line. And so how can we have a more flexible headcount? Hence the need for a more project-based employment versus a long-term employment, right? And do you want to comment at all at the moment on your use of project-based employment and consulting as a way of managing your career?
Sure. So I'm really working on what my expertise is with building operations from ground up for high growth private equity and venture capital managers. So the funny thing is, I love change. I embrace change. I'm always looking for better ways of doing things. In fact, my biggest challenge I had when I was in-house in the same role for 14 years is the group had tremendous success. They went from less than 700 million under management to 5 billion. And, it's like a constant puzzle of how do you put the plumbing in to do more with less people, work-life balance, no emergencies. I like to sleep well at night and turn my phone off at a certain hour, and I don't want anyone to feel that stress or panic. So I'm sort of codependent with the people I work for, as far as I don't want anyone to feel the panic that something's going to break down. So where I've landed, and I'm choosing to have one client at the time. At first I was doing two, but for the nature of what I do, when you're literally setting things up, replacing service providers, I actually just got done inputting a payroll system, and I love it. So because before, when I was over 5 billion, they had corporate do that type of stuff. And, you just miss a skill set that now I have that's applicable to any small business. I do manage several teams remotely, as far as the outsourced fund administrator, banking teams, insurance teams, coordinating everything. And it's very collaborative. And so what I love is the collaborative nature, but not being responsible for the heavy grind of managing people. Because I will say, some places the politics get so tough, and I'm a doer. I'm a behind the scenes, as long as I feel appreciated quietly, it's great, but I don't do well in a high politic environment. So that's something that I think remote works great for collaborative high performers. Of course, I miss being by people. We'll see how things end up shaking out. I do a lot of Zooms, and I'm on the phone all day long. But for me right now, I am going to look to add another client. But when I had two, the other thing for what I'm doing, there has to be an alignment with senior management. I'm an expert at what I do, and I want things to run smoothly. And so one project I had, they didn't want to change things. And we're just, if you're not going to adapt to technology and constantly improving your skills, you can't keep up. And, with my current team I'm working with, they saw it and the pain. The one guy was staying up all night long. And the biggest compliment he always gives me now is we have one weekly Zoom meeting. And he's like, nothing ever blows up. I don't have to check my email at night. And I'm like, thank you. So I might be, I'm an accountant. I love change. Technology is our friend, and so are service providers. So
well,
I
one
don't know
of
if
the
that
things
answers
you
your
touched on.
question.
Yeah, so one of the things you touched on there was, the employee engagement. And I would be curious to hear how some of you others who are managers are dealing with and keeping your employees engaged.
One thing I'll add when people answer that, I will say at my last role, I managed over half of a department. And, we always think about quality work environments top down, and we're always so critical of managers, but I don't know if enough training goes to employees about being a good team player and pitching in and taking your share. Because I will say I'm not managing any direct people, and I was bullied in my last role, and you just get to a point where, a positive collaborative work environment, it's both streams. It's going down, bottom down, top up, and culture is always set from the top. So that's one thing I would add too, is now people are nice and collaborative and are so thankful when things I'm not having to push a heavy rock uphill. So that was just one thing. Managing people in this environment, I think companies need to have high expectations in a remote environment and hold junior employees accountable. So
accountability is very, very important. You're absolutely right. Any other thoughts on ways to keep people engaged? And accountability is absolutely one of those ways to keep people engaged.
Well, Paul, I would say, just from our perspective, I think that the first thing you have to do is ask employees how they want to keep engaged. I think we've done a lot of internal surveys, and and one of the things our that I noticed, our company was acquired by a private equity firm earlier in the year, and I just started a couple months ago, and I've seen some of the changes that they've instituted as they try to grow this thing and scale it nationally. They did what they call flip the pyramid. So the manager roles that they've spelled out, and it's pretty expressly discussed internally, is they're the managers that are to serve the employees, not the other way around. And they looked at it as really being, instead of top down, it's the top is the line level employees now is
Yeah.
the way they view it, and how they manage things and how they put KPIs to it. So it's just an interesting kind of shift in thought, and it's something that seems to be working so far. So it's just, there is a lot of outreach to employees. What's working, what's not working, what do we need to do better, what do you need, that kind of thing. And just it's a constant bit of communication that goes both ways.
I agree. I think servant leadership as a concept is taking on greater importance in the business, and it is a great way of helping to keep people engaged. So I think that's good to hear and see. Improved crisis communication. We've got to be better as leaders at being transparent, at being effective in the way we tell all of our stakeholders, internal and external, what's going on, because we are a savvy people today, much more savvy than we ever were before. And when I say we in that case, I mean the entirety of our population. When I was growing up, just to use a stupid example, I would have never thought that I should or even could call somebody in authority to complain that my mother would have smacked me in the butt for doing something that was truly unsafe for me, right? And I'm sure all of us, though my parents only hit me once or twice in my entire life, I'm sure all of us have had some kind of an experience with that if we were of an age, right? Today's kids, they know that if you even raise your hand and threaten it, they can call someone and have you arrested for it, right? And they're willing to do it. They don't understand the consequences of what they're doing, but they're willing to make those calls. We're a much more educated, much more savvy people today than we ever were. And so we as now employers have to do a far better job of the way we communicate what's going on, especially during a crisis situation, or especially in looking to prevent a crisis. Anything else on this list before we move on? So here are some things that I've been observing, or strategies. There we go. Strategies for success that you might want to look at. I'm going to just reduce the size of this a little bit to make it easier so we see the whole slide. Okay. There we go. So observe the workplace. And it's those who are observant that are going to be the most successful. Think about in your employment, who are the people that are succeeding on their jobs? When you're interviewing, ask, who are the people that are successful in this company and what makes them successful, right? Who are the people that you see around you who are challenged and what makes them challenged? Now you'll know, what do I need to do to be successful? What do I need to do to not be failing, right? And you can then move forward in a much better way. How do you bring value to your employer? Remember, it's not about your perception of what's going on. It's always about the boss's perception. We've talked a lot about being flexible. And in all situations, rather than being demanding or making definitive statements, if you see something that you're not sure about, that you don't like, that you need to change, ask questions around it. It shows much greater empathy, it shows much more compassion, and it shows greater flexibility and a willingness to learn. So ask questions about things that are not making sense. Don't make demands. Be accessible and available. again, I'll turn to my husband's and a story from his work. There's one specific individual that's on a different team from him, that his team has projects that overlap. It's very common that this individual will instant message or email or text or somehow contact my husband. He'll ask for some information. My husband will usually give it back to him right away or immediately ask a clarifying question. And then he sits and waits. And an hour goes by and there's no response. So now he'll ping him again, either on instant message or maybe by email. And another hour goes by and there's no response. And then he'll call and the guy doesn't answer the phone. And after another 15 minutes or half an hour, 2.5 hours or more since the original request that he made for information my husband's trying to give him, my husband will then reach out to him and copy his boss. And immediately he gets a response back. That's not being accessible and available to your employer, right? We need to be the first to respond. People are getting tired of video, so don't be afraid to use the phone. I think we rely too much on email and instant messaging, whether it's text or otherwise. And so we used to do a lot of stuff by phone. I think we still can and should. And one of the things we want to remember when it comes to communication, when all you have is the written word, you are missing out on about 85 to 90% of all of the information that's processed in a communication by the receiver. So the more we can use voice, the more we can use video, the more information you're projecting when you are talking to someone, and the better they are to understand what you're asking for or talking about. Always, always, always share your thoughts. Now, you got to be able to do it in an appropriate way, right? But always be ready to share what you have to say. Your voice has value. Your thoughts and ideas are important. You need to find a way to help your employer to hear those things minimally by just telling them, but beyond that, if possible. Any thoughts on these last two bullets? I have a couple of ideas, but I don't want to keep talking too long.
I think, Paul, that's super valuable. I think it's always been that way. I think it's becoming more and more important to communicate properly. I always felt that putting something in writing sometimes misses the emotion behind, and it can be misread.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I always try to send an email or message and then follow up with a call. And I know it's redundant, but sometimes clarity is worth the effort.
Perfect. Great. Jerry, I'm seeing people are needing to run. Did I not understand? Are we limited to the 10 o'clock? Do we need to stop in the next minute or two?
Oh, not at all. Not
Okay.
at all.
No, you can go on.
All right.
Sure.
I just don't want to, keep people longer than we have to. That's for sure.
No,
So
dealing with people's schedules, that's all.
Yep, that's fine. So reach out to others regularly, schedule your communications. One of the things that my husband has done, and I've started doing as well. In fact, I've suggested this to other places, and I'm hearing back now from a lot of people who are using this strategy as a way of building culture and keeping in connection with other employees. Create a list. It'd be great if it were about 50 people or so, but create a list of as many people as you can that are significant to you, either in your company or outside your company. If you're looking for work, just in general, and the most important people in your network. And every week on Monday, take 5 names off of that list and reach out to them just to say hello. And you probably won't get to talk to those 5 people on Monday. You may get to talk to 1 or 2 of them. But by the end of the week, you will likely have had a conversation with almost all, if not all, of those 5 people. And it can be just a, hey, how you doing? What's happening in your world conversation. Here's some things that are happening in my place. It could be, listen, I've got this project coming up and I'm going to need some info from you. And I just wanted to give you a heads up so we can plan and prepare for that. Right. But have some kind of a conversation with 5 people. Next week, take the next 5 people off of that list and do the same thing on Monday. Reach out to them. And the week after that, take the next 5 and reach out to them. And even if you only get to talk to 3 of them in any given week, the fact that you've got an ongoing rotation where you're constantly reaching out to these people about once a quarter, once every 3 or 4 months, right? You're going to end up creating relationship with those people and or maintaining relationship with them. So that's one way to do that. Very quick, Ann, quick comment.
All I was going to say, the one thing though, with the younger generations, they feel like email or phone calls are threatening. And that's something that I've had to adjust to, especially you don't want to be emailing at night because you're trying to be respectful. So Slack, more casual conversations, but that is a huge generational gap. Because when you're older and maybe more senior in title, just by reaching out to someone junior, they may take that as threatening in the new work environment. And so I don't know if you've observed that.
I understand what you're saying, and that can be true if you're going at them with, tell me what's going on, give me, right? But if you're creating a more generic conversation and a conversation that's more about, I care about you and I want to learn more about you and make sure you're doing okay. Eventually, after 3 or 4 of those conversations, they'll get less threatened by them because they'll become familiar with them.
Some companies, including like Yelp, they now have training for managers where you're not allowed to directly reach out to people. You have to go through layers and levels and ping. And so,
Okay.
it's just one of those things like, you don't want to seem like you're putting pressure, forcing people to build a relationship with you, because that has its own issues.
Absolutely. And you have to play nice within the confines of the individual organization you're working with. Absolutely. But I've seen a lot of people find that they have success in building relationships by doing this and maintaining their network.
How about a subject line in the email that says water cooler moment to sort of take the edge off. In other words, it isn't from the top and being accusatory or demanding, etc. It's just what it says. It's a water cooler moment to try to take the edge off it, if you will.
And that could potentially work, and it's not a bad idea at all, Jerry, to use some kind of a disclaimer like that. But I understand what Ann is saying, that here I am in the position of power, and I'm kind of forcing you into conversation, right? And so you do need to be aware of that. One of the other strategies that seems to be working for a lot of folks that I talk to is they will take 5 or 10 minutes out of the beginning of any meeting just to talk about life. And oftentimes that means as the person calling the meeting, I'm going to share something about myself just to open up the conversation. And then everybody gets a chance to comment on it. And it doesn't have to be, real personally revealing. For example, this morning for me, showing you that pile of snow outside my window. Right? It's just some little thing that got us to talk a little bit about something other than the topic of the moment, right? Some other ways that I find people have been successful. If you're not a mentor to someone, become a mentor and find a mentor for yourself. And that mentor doesn't need to be in your department. It could be anywhere in the company that's appropriate, but find a mentor within the organization and be a mentor to somebody in the organization. Those relationships can help you to show more value to management, among other things. Networking constantly, and that's again going to the reaching out to the folks that I just mentioned. Keep the attitude positive, and one of the things that I've enjoyed very much about Mary and Ann in particular is that the two of you have had a wonderful smile on this entire conversation, and I really appreciate seeing that. But if we all were to smile more, imagine how much nicer the work environment would be. right? And if you're motivated, you can be motivational, but try and help each other to build on that motivation, because it's going to be contagious. You know, if you can do something to help someone else be more motivated, that's going to help motivate you more, and vice versa. Lead by example, ask for feedback, you know, be seen in the workplace, right? Just because we're not in person doesn't mean that you should not be a presence to your employer. And so that presence is, how are you being in connection and in conversation with all different types of people throughout your employment or employer. The consulting employer, or I'm sorry, consulting employee. This is another real big thing that I think a lot of people will find greater success in long-term careers if you can find ways to be more like a consultant, right? So a consultant is always seeking out what's the next challenge and how can I be the one to solve that problem? Because as long as I'm seen as the problem solver, a part of the solution, then I'm going to be valuable to the employer. That means you need to be innovative. It may mean being a mentor. It's always looking for that next project. It's always bringing new skills to the job that you're on. And I think that's one of the things that I've noticed between Gen X, Gen Z, and us baby boomers. Yes, I'm a tail end of the baby boomers. We are not often looking to learn new stuff as easily or as quickly as others are. Excuse me, the younger generations are. But if we do, we'll show that we're much more valuable to our employer. If you are not a member of your associations, both industry and professional associations, and even right now, for those looking for work, your alumni association, you need to become active members of those organizations. There's been 3 studies done recently, one by Manpower, one by Indeed, I believe, and now I forget, I think the other was maybe Lee Hecht Harrison, and they all determined that one of the greatest places to find new career opportunities is by going to your high school and college alumni associations. That there's that connection to nostalgia, there's that connection to the school that transcends age and time. And people who are making those connections today, oftentimes with someone that they've not talked to in 15, 20, or 40 years, those are the connections that have become the most fruitful networking connections. So don't ignore those. But at your industry and professional associations, that's where you're going to keep current on what's going on in your industry and bring value back to your company, because you know more about what's happening globally within your industry and within your profession. Any thoughts, questions, comments here? Reinvent, reinvent, reinvent yourself. Constantly reinvent yourself. Constantly look to improve your interpersonal skills. And, you know, we in our generations tend to be pretty good at that, but we're not great. The younger generations are poor, very poor in their interpersonal skills. And so anything that we can do to help improve interpersonal skills at all levels is only going to be helpful. And the last one there is one that really, truthfully, is about me. Learn to keep your emotions in check. You know, I tend to be a hot-blooded Italian, and not that I'm an angry person or that I'm an aggressive person, but I wear my emotions on my sleeve. And everybody knows exactly what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling because it's just telegraphed in my face. The more we can keep that in check and remember that it's business, it's not personal, I think the better that we'll do. So I include that as much because I need to hear me say that more than anybody else maybe, but it's important for all of us, okay? This concept of entitlement you know, more and more I hear in society, well, you deserve that day off, or you deserve this, or you deserve that. Yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily true all the time, but we're so used to hearing it, we believe it now. And I think if we reverse that and think more about what can I do to prove my value, it would be a better way of conducting your career. And, you know, I probably should put this last one in bold, become a work search expert. Here's a study that was done by Manpower, and they do this almost every year. Currently, within the last 2 years, the most recent study showed a career lasts 10 years. A job today, statistically, is averaging 18 to 30 months. So we all need to become experts, just as we've had to learn to be an expert in managing our healthcare benefits and our retirement benefits. We also need to become experts in work search or in job search, because we're going to be doing a lot more of it than ever before. I'm 60 years old this year. I'm going to work till I'm 70. I've got to reinvent myself one more time. And now I've got to go and find 5 to 7 new jobs before I retire. That's the reality of the world today. Are you prepared for that? Rhetorical question. Any last thoughts or comments? Go ahead, Jerry.
It's interesting, because what you're effectively saying is that a job is something that you do between work searches.
Exactly.
It's how you fill the time
That's
between
right.
work searches, right?
That's right.
So you're really in the work search business, and you better be good at it in order to perhaps lengthen that time between work searches.
Yes. Yes. Chris, thank you for that link on mentoring. I'll look forward to checking that out myself later on. So just a couple of other, stupid little things that maybe have helped you. And, I love Bob Kennedy's quote here. But, I think it's become pretty evident that change is the constant. So we need to be better and better at change on a regular basis. Buckminster Fuller, I love his quote here. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a model that makes the existing model obsolete. And if we look at Microsoft, if we look at Apple, if we look even at BlackBerry back in the day, if we look at Amazon, look at even Walmart, right? They have changed the model and made the old model obsolete.
Yeah, it's the Kodak story, right? The paradigm has changed, where you're arrogant enough to think that you're in the picture taking business, and boy, it's going to be there forever. And then suddenly there's a phone that you carry with you all the time.
That's right.
That has that ability, and suddenly you're no longer in the picture taking business. I don't know. That's something to keep in mind about
Yes.
paradigms changing all the time.
I'm doing this presentation quite a bit over the next couple of months, but here's a list of some of the other presentations that I'll be doing with contact information, so that if you're interested in joining, you're welcome to do so. And I will happily provide the slides to anybody who wants them. You just need to reach out to me. I did mention that I've got a couple of different groups that I run. The Yojo Club for people under 30 years old. These times, by the way, are all Eastern time. So the Yojo Club meets every other Friday at 1 o'clock. And with the exception of the professional support group of Morris County, all the other groups operate in a very different manner. This the professional support group of Morris County is very similar to what we just did today. It's a speakers-based group. The others are all peer support groups, which really means if you have a question or an issue, you're going to have 10 minutes out of that meeting that everyone is going to focus on you and what your question or needs are and help you to resolve that challenge. So you get 10 or 15 minutes out of the meeting's time. The group is limited to, less than 10 people, so everybody can get that 10 plus minutes. You spend a minute or so saying, this is who I am and what I'm looking to do. Here's my challenge in my job search. And then the rest of the time, the group is providing the brainstorming to resolve that challenge for you. So the Yojo Club is for folks under 30. The Outstanding Careers Group is for people in the LGBTQ community. Morris County Executives, that's named out of Morris County because that's where we are, but pretty much anyone who can Zoom in is welcome to join us. And the Supply Chain Professionals Group is specifically for folks in the supply chain arena. So that's my spiel for today. Thank you so much for your input and for your time. And please reach out to those who've had to leave and let them know how much I appreciated everyone's thoughts and input. It really made the presentation for me very interactive and exciting.